The region of Feythabolis is largely considered a footnote in the history of humanity. A small empire having risen in the region some 2,000 years prior to the advent of the Uli Accords and founding of Concord in YC0, and one that quickly was subsumed by the rising Angel cartel from Kursk between YC4 and NYC104, it has remained ignored by the majority, outside of explorers and intrepid capsule warlords vying for sovereignty over the systems of the region since Y105, when star-based system sovereignty was made widely available. Much of the history of the Feythabolian Empire has, sadly, been lost over the intervening century. What is known about their history to this point is limited to fragmented historical texts recovered from Angel cartel smuggling operations, and living memory record of the older members of what few remaining settlements and outposts still exist in the old core systems of the AVSCL constellation, particularly in the systems of JTPTA, the previous capital of the defunct empire, and F8Y13, the original cradle star of the Faith's people. Most other such settlements having long since been razed, or abandoned after repeated Angel cartel resource raids, and further decimated by Sanchez's nation incursions around YC108. To this point, what is known about their history is that the fledgling Faith's people rose, initially from the world of F8Y13-3, a temperate planet straddling the line of the classical alpine and archipelago classifications, with primarily shallow oceans and limited tectonic shifting. Most land formations are composed of igneous rocks, suggesting that the planet may have been at some point in the past closer to an oceanic world. The island and small continental formations likely forming from burn-through hotspots in the crust steadily building up the land masses over hundreds, or thousands of years prior to the first human inhabitation. An ancient megascale construct centered near one of the geologically younger island chains suggests that at some point in the distant past, an advanced human civilization attempted to stabilize one or more of these geological burn-through hotspots and the planetary mantle. It appears that the early Faith's people had initial difficulties achieving space flight, due to problematic resource distributions brought on by the manner of land formation. It wasn't until around BYC 1921 that the planetary population of F8Y13-3 would achieve reliable space flight, and begin to expand beyond their cradle world into the rest of the system, and quickly spreading through the AVSCL constellation by way of surviving jump gate chains, though were largely hampered by still requiring lengthy sublight transits and systems. A damaged gate in JTPTA was also quickly discovered, but largely left alone in favor of expansion within the limited gate chain of the constellation, and the core worlds would solidify over the next few centuries. After this point, much history has been lost or fragmented, but it is known that around BYC 1406 a dedicated project was conceived to expand further from these core systems. An attempt to repair the damaged gate in JTPTA yielded promising results, and a number of successful tests were conducted with small craft scouting what would eventually become CFLFB, and nearly a dozen large exploratory and colonization ships were built to begin further expansion into the wider Feythabolis region. Surviving records suggest that these colonization vessels were completed sometime around BYC 1112, and were set to cross the gate from JTPTA to CFLFB in BYC 1100 after a parade through the core systems, visiting each colonized world and major habitat to onboard its contingents of colonists. Unfortunately, when the fleet arrived at the repaired CFLFB gate and engaged for transit, a cascade failure in the gate's stabilization systems occurred in the split second of transit, causing a mass collapse of the transportation corridor and irreparable damage to the gate structure. The colonization fleet was presumed lost with all hands, and led to a dramatic shift in the society of the Faith's people from star-eyed expansionists toward a more insular, introspective but still largely progressive outlook on the universe. The only reason this particular set of records seems to still exist is due to how pervasive it was in changing the outlook of the Faith's people at the time and stuck deeply in historical memory, as the great tragedy of a people reaching too far, too quickly. From BYC 1100 on until BYC 884, the technological advancement of the Faith's people in the AVSCL constellation had largely stagnated, though not completely halted, even as a cultural golden age began of philosophy and progressive action. It would not be until BYC 737 when the next attempt at reaching farther would occur. With the advent of rudimentary FTL communication interlinks, and the start of construction of a replacement gate for the one destroyed in BYC 1100, and the first attempt at proper Stargate construction by the denizens of the AVSCL constellation. An outbound flight construction fleet beginning in STL transit from JTPTA towards CFLFB the same year construction began, and would take 53 years moving at relativistic velocities to reach CFLFB, and a further 2 for the destination gate to be finished. Activation appears to have occurred without incident, and the Faithas people would begin to slowly expand once more, taking a measured approach to expansion. Soon, finding many of the worlds in the region they began to slowly populate were quite hospitable, similarly to the easily inhabited rainforest worlds of JTPTA-2, 4, and V, which had long past become the cultural and administrative nerve center of the fledgling empire. By BYC 45, the fledgling empire had small outposts and observatories in most systems that constitute the modern Feythabolis region, and had a steadily growing number of populations across the region, but were still largely technologically destitute to the large empires that had developed in the core of the New Eden cluster. By BYC 27, they seemed to have developed their first warp drive and began their first steps beyond their home region, and seemed to have made first contact with a number of small planetary cultures during this time. By BYC 10, the Faithas people would make first contact with a number of roving marauder fleets in the modern regions of Ternarifus and Impasse that would significantly impede further expansion with their limited technological base. YC-10 would signal the start of the steady decline of the Feythabolis Empire, as the rising influence of the Angel Cartel spread and eventually stabilized in Curse, then expanded south through Catch and Impasse, and eventually into the region of Feythabolis itself. Initial skirmishes between the Faithas people and the Angels were limited, but quickly escalated in scale as the cartel would grow with the influx of outlaws drawn to its rising reputation from the core empires. And the defensive fleets of the Feythabolian Empire would be subdued steadily over the intervening decades. By YC 89, the Feythabolian Empire would be largely defunct, with most of its cultural centers plundered, and untold numbers of its populace spirited away or killed by the Angel Cartel. At this time, no concrete census data seems to have survived to the present day as to the exact size of the Faithas population at its height. In the AVSCL constellation, the remnants of grand cities and public works can be found largely having been reclaimed by the rainforests and wildlife of the temperate planets in JTPTA, and other environs in the systems of the constellation, standing testament to an empire that most have forgotten. The region of Feythabolis is an intriguing example of the rise and fall of a civilization, with limited information available about its history. The Feythabolian Empire rose from F8Y133, a temperate planet with limited tectonic activity, and faced initial difficulties achieving space flight due to resource distributions. They eventually achieved reliable space flight and began to expand throughout the AVSCL constellation. In conclusion, the fall of the Feythabolis Empire is a tragic story of a once great empire that is now largely forgotten. Despite its impressive achievements in architecture, art, and governance, the empire ultimately succumbed to a combination of internal corruption, external pressures, and natural disasters. Today, only a few scattered ruins and artifacts remain as a testament to its former glory. It is important to remember the lessons of Feythabolis and to continue to learn from the mistakes of past empires, in order to prevent history from repeating itself. Thanks for watching this video on Starship News Network. We hope you found the content informative and entertaining. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Also, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below with your thoughts and suggestions. And if you're interested in more EVE Online lore and news, be sure to check out our other videos on the channel. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.